My friends, we are back on the Rabbi Shmuel Show with Dr. Renee Garfinkle, the world-famous radio host, author, psychologist. Recently in an article on the JewishIdeas.org, you spoke about the authoritarianism that was evident in the Jewish community as it relates to the issue of a rabbah. Rabbah was a woman, Sarah Horowitz, who was declared a rabbah by Rabbi Avi Weiss in Riverdale. Not a rabbi, but a rabbah, almost a female spiritual leader. Who served many of the same functions as a rabbi, and a whole brouhaha broke out, and you saw this. You see this as an example of too much authoritarianism within the Jewish community. Can you explain this to the millions of listeners of the Rabbi Shmuel Show? Why are you laughing?
Absolutely. The millions of listeners can't wait to hear this. Well, the rabbah incident is a very good example of it. Besides the fact that it was radical to openly promote a woman to a religious leadership position within the Orthodox community, the response was what was authoritarianism. Another group of rabbis, the Agudat Yisrael, is the ones who I believe issued that announcement, took it upon themselves to say that not only would they reject this instance, but any synagogue, any congregation, any community that elevated women to a position of religious leadership, public leadership, I think was the word that they used, would be considered not Orthodox any longer. That's a wonderful example of an authoritarian approach to it. We disagree with what you're doing, so we're going to drum you out of the core.
Isn't that just what Jews have been doing throughout Jewish history, or is that a deviation from what Jews have been doing throughout Jewish history?
Well, Jewish history is pretty long, and I think that for
well, they did it to Spinoza. If the people, the authoritarians, quote unquote, views this as a deviation from the path like Spinoza was, so shouldn't they do that?
Well, ostracism is a weapon. It's a very heavy-handed weapon. It's similar to execution. Sure, in Jewish legal systems, it is possible to put someone to death for a violation, but you're not supposed to use that extreme measure very often. And
so you're saying there's an overreaction?
Seldom was used in the past, and certainly not to a whole group of people. The real use of the kind of subtle ostracism, because after all, a group of men who get together, even men with rabbinical ordination who get together and decide that another group is not in the club, they don't really have a lot of power, except the informal power, which really is the power that maintains Judaism. I mean, we don't have real enforcement. We operate with informal enforcement of conformity.
So in your clinical position, opinion, do you think that what was motivating this was something beyond just a theological difference, or you think...
Oh, I think there is no theological basis for their being upset, because the rabbah was a title that has no precedent, so there's no halachic basis for rejecting it. It's a made up title.
Let me ask you: have you shared your findings with rabbinic organizations? Your paper, have you shown it to them?
Well, it's out in public.
Have you received any reaction to it yet?
I've received a little reaction, but
mostly positive. Mostly
positive. Some dispute about a particular use of a word that was thought to be a little too heavy for the purposes to which I used it. Mostly positive. The examples that I took, and the article has lots of examples from different blogs and people's quotes to illustrate a point. The examples I used were found to be offensive by particularly people on the far right, the ultra-Orthodox. Because most of the extreme examples came from those people. But yeah,
I just would like to ask you two basically easy questions, and then we'll call it.
You can ask me hard
questions. No,
I
did very simple questions. Very, very simple questions. First is, if there was a new rabbinic organization being started, and there is one,
there is one, that's
International Rabbinic Fellowship, what advice? This is the first easy question. What advice would you give them?
Okay, you want to ask the second too?
No,
or
no,
shall I just go with that one?
Go with the first. This is an easy question.
Well, the article has several suggestions,
Okay.
recommendations at the end, and one
and
of
this
them,
applies to Christian organizations as well.
it applies to secular organizations too.
Across the board.
Yeah.
Secular. Congress, too, while we're at it.
Yes.
The White House as well.
Certainly, Congress likes to consolidate power.
Okay.
And
So what's the
not
advice?
share it. So the advice is, first of all, make an effort to have diversity within the organization. Jews are a very small group of people. And when you narrow it down to Orthodox Jews, you're in an even smaller group of people. And if you then start to limit it by not letting women, for example, in, or not letting people who are a little bit off the main track, then you have a rigidity of thinking and of judgment that the research has shown leads to making bad decisions. So
That's good advice. So have
first advice
diversity of
would
opinion.
be to make a point of inviting diverse opinions. People with different backgrounds, people
Okay.
from different countries, people who have different life experience should be part of the inner circle.
All right.
And another recommendation I would have is one that goes back to the ancient times. In the Talmud, as you know, the minority opinion is always preserved, even if it's not followed, but it's kept and documented as a sign of respect and also as a recognition by the majority opinion that under different circumstances, the minority opinion ought to be reconsidered. That practice doesn't exist today, and I think it's important to bring it back.
That's a very powerful idea. Now, just before we let you go, final question, even easier.
Yes.
What advice would you have for me in my rabbinate? What would you say to me?
In general?
No, I mean about this issue, to avoid the pitfalls of authoritarianism.
Consider the possibility that you might be wrong.
Okay. That's beautiful wisdom. Thank you for sharing that with me.
It's my pleasure.
I'm about to thank you for sharing that, but maybe I'm wrong in thanking you. All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. Dr.
Okay, you can't be wrong
Garfinkle,
with that.
thank you for your very interesting take on this issue. Provocative, exciting. If you disagree with Dr. Garfinkle, then that's okay, because she's not authoritarian in her viewpoint. And
Try not to be.
she wants diversity of opinion, so you could write to her. She's open to that. She's welcome to hear. She's open to hearing it. And if you want to read her article in depth, go to Jewish Ideas and click on it, and you'll see Dr. Renee Garfinkle and Hannah Rothstein from New York, and together they put together this very, very interesting and provocative article, which I think is a must-read, and especially the people who are criticized, or the organizations that are criticized, not people, the organizations that are criticized, should read this and should think and ask themselves whether it applies to them at all.
And I hope they find that the criticism is constructive.
All right. Well,
All
thank
right.
you, Dr. Garfinkle.
Thank
And
you.
one last question.
Yes.
Is it true that you're considering coming here more often to daven in our synagogue?
I live in another neighborhood. I
All
live
right.
downtown, but
Okay.
I hear good things.
Well, you come maybe during the week sometime.
Thank you very much.
All right, my friends. Dr. Garfinkle, this is the Rabbi Shmuel Show.